So the central setting of Fear and Hunger 2 Termina is the Termina Festival. 14 people go to Pre-Evil on a train, they have a weirder dream, and this weirder tells them they have 3 days left for them to reduce their number to 1 in order to escape. Over the natural course of the game, you also learn that the festival causes those within the city to slowly go mad and eventually transform into monsters. Most of this stuff is pretty clear by just playing the game, but a lot of it is not made clear at all. A lot of details of how the festival works are strangely kind of hidden. The first lead to understanding it is when you go to sleep for the first time and talk to Perkele. Since the 14 of you are such late additions to the party, your days are already running short. The festival will see its climax in just 3 days. That is how long you have time. Use it wisely. This establishes that our 3-day time limit is not the same time limit the others in the festival had. We're late additions to it, where everybody else in Pre-Evil would have been there from the start. This is further explained in a very obscure conversation with this specific Moonscorched in this big group in the sewers here. You need to ignore him, then intimidate him, then you can talk to him outside of battle. What is going on in this city? The Festival of Termina! You know it! You folks are the third festival already. Third? The first festival, it was just us, the Pre-Evilian folks. The second festival was once the soldiers of the Empire marched here. Then you came. Doesn't the festival end after everyone's dead? Who knows, but what if you don't want to kill your family and loved ones? This happens. You slowly lose your mind and become like us. You end up killing each other anyway. I'm one of the lucky ones. I still got my rugged good looks. Some of my friends got real twisted and nasty. So it's not just us who are late to the festival. The Bremen army also showed up late. Though we know from Perkele's lines that the time isn't extended when we join. So the festival has been going on continuously, which means these festivals aren't entirely separate. But it is separate in the sense that we don't need to kill the entire population of Pre-Evil. For us, the festival is just a battle between these 14. So the other festivals mentioned must be describing what fights need to happen for somebody to win. If you are in the Bremen army, you need to kill every other soldier of the Bremen army to win. If you are in Pre-Evil from the start, then the entire population of Pre-Evil except yourself needs to die. Which makes the festival seem pretty impossible for most participants. But they would have longer than we do, being late and only having 3 days. So how long exactly? There's very limited references to time in the game. The easiest one to find is the newspaper article, which is a week-old newspaper reporting on the end of the Great War, which mentions that the Bremen army pushed into Pre-Evil just days prior to the treaty. Because week-old and just days prior are both vague terms, the Bremen army entering Pre-Evil could be between 8 to maybe even 16 days before the game begins, which itself is 2 days before the last day of the festival. And this isn't important to how the festival mechanically works, but the Kaiser Critique was written on September 17th, 1942, and mentions the same peace talks as the newspaper, so it's probably written shortly after the newspaper article, which is a week old at the time of the game. So the game begins about a week, maybe a bit more or less, after September 17th. Anyway, we now know the Bremen army got there 1 to 2 weeks ago, but they didn't get there at the start of the festival, so how long is the festival actually? Well, the answer is intuitive, but the proof is pretty hidden. It lasts 1 lunar cycle, full moon to full moon. Close to the sewer entrance in the forest, we have to talk to another Moonscorched and convince him to stop fighting, after which we can have this conversation. What happened in the city? Not too long ago. When was it again? Alright, during the full moon. How long has it been since the last full moon? That's when it began. Everyone saw the dream, and then the violence started. From the city, the chaos and bloodshed spread to the old town as well. Everyone was killing everyone. In the slums we kept to ourselves, but it was no use. If you just try to wait it out, the dreams become more lively. The dreams change you. That's when I fled. So the festival began with the full moon. And then if we talk to one of the many passive women in Old Town, she'll say, "Look at the sky. Is it full moon yet? Do I still have time? Time before what? Before I lose myself completely. So it isn't exactly explicitly said that the full moon is also the end of the festival, but I think that's the most sensible interpretation of this dialogue. So from these obscure sources, we now know that the festival begins and ends with the full moon, giving it a duration of 29 or 30 days, and that those within the city when it begins will be the main participants of the festival, of which only one can survive, but later, if any group enters the city, like the Bremen army or the passengers of the train, they will be in kind of a sub-festival, which lasts until the same date as the main festival, but is not tied to the same participant list, so they can have their own winner if only one of them survives. It's unclear whether you can have a winner from each festival. Say everybody in the city but Soldier Ghoul 1 over here, Sickle Villager 3, and Marco survive. They're 3 separate festivals, so can they all win? The festival seems to end after the player character makes it up to the tower. If you do so on day 3, then Rare will attack you, but if you do it on day 2, then it's just Perkele, who's separate from the festival. Either way, you win the fight and Rare leaves, which also brings up the question of if anybody in the city survives when you win? Does getting ending B save Mr. Kiefer? There's still some questions there. I'd also propose that, considering there are restrictions on leaving the city, as Marco finds out on day 1, there's likely also restrictions on entering the city, considering only the Bremen army and 1 train made it into Prehevel during this whole month. But it's just speculation as to what those restrictions are exactly. And so, about the date the game takes place and the length of the festival, just to check, I looked up a lunar calendar for 1942 to see if it lines up well with our known dates for the festival ending about a week after September 17th, and I wasn't expecting it to work well, but it actually lines up perfectly. The full moon in September 1942 was on September 24th, exactly 1 week after the Kaiser Critique was published, which actually lines up perfectly enough that I think this was intentional. I think Mira probably looked up a lunar calendar and decided on this date for the festival. So that means our newspaper article could have been written September 15th, the Bremen army entered Prehevel September 13th maybe, the festival began on the August 26th full moon, and the game itself takes place on September 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. I'm kind of surprised I don't think I've seen anybody has checked this before, but that's cool. This gives us some exact dates to use if we want. I do know of an argument against this, which is the conversation with Marina on the last day, where you can ask, is it a Wednesday? But neither you nor Marina are sure about the day of the week, so I don't think that's solid evidence. And September 24th was Thursday, which is 1 day off Wednesday, so it makes sense to be unsure about that. So I think that still makes sense. So this was some of the less readily apparent information about how the Termina Festival works, and some of it is actually pretty important if you want to understand what's happening. Goodbye? I don't know how to end videos.